Please welcome to the front Molly and Bobbie O'Steen.
Oh boy. Hi, I'm Molly O'Steen. I'm a film and theater educator and historian, and I'm so happy to be here with Bobbie O'Steen, maybe some relation. And she is a film historian, a writer. She has written some wonderful books such as Cut to the Chase, 45 Years of Editing America's Favorite Movies, about the life and career of Sam O'Steen, who edited the film that we watched tonight, along with The Invisible Cut. And her most recent book, Making the Cut at Pixar, is all about how Pixar, specifically the editors at Pixar, revolutionized the world of animation. You can also find her in the Criterion special features of a few movies, such as The Graduate, Risky Business, and Hard Day's Night, and most recently, Body Heat, where she interviews the wonderful Carol Littleton. And we're here to talk about the movie we just saw, Cool Hand Luke. We're gonna talk about the making of it, tell some stories, talk about the editing, of course. We'll talk about Paul Newman, and don't worry, we only have good things to say about Paul Newman. You are marked safe from loving Paul Newman. So let's talk a little bit about how this movie came to be. It was directed by Stuart Rosenberg, who was mostly known as a TV director. And how did it come to be made at Warner Brothers starring Paul Newman? What was the journey there?
Originally, it was supposed to be starring Jack Lemmon, of all people, and his company got the rights to the book. And it turns out it wasn't the right fit, but Stuart Rosenberg, who was also interested, he was a TV director, he had never done a feature before, but he was interested in making it, and this was all at Columbia Studios, and they did not want to make this film because they didn't want Paul Newman to die. So Warner Brothers, he was under contract with Warner Brothers, Paul Newman, and so they ended up doing this film, which was kind of interesting because they had been known for making sort of gritty prison movies going back to the 30s. And also, as I said, Paul Newman was under contract anyway. And it was an unusual thing for Paul Newman to sign on to because he had never agreed to do a film before a screenplay was written. And he really asked that when it was written, that it wasn't written specifically for him, meaning sort of a star vehicle. I mean, what was so interesting about him, so many interesting things and admirable things, but one of the things is he really considered himself a character actor rather than a movie star, and didn't really want too much focus to be on his gorgeousness, which is impossible.
Impossible. Yeah. Sorry, those were the hands you were dealt, Paul. And Sam O'Steen, who edited this film, it came out in 1967. He edited this and The Graduate in the same year. And guess what? He was not nominated for an Academy Award for either movie. So if you sometimes get frustrated by Academy Award nominations, we feel you on that. But it's so interesting that he edited both these movies in the same year, because even though they're obviously very different movies with very different actors and stories, they both spoke to the time that they were in.
Yeah, I mean, it was, in some ways, it's funny, because it was made in 1967. In some ways, it was a 70s movie and a 60s movie, because movies in the you think of sort of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or sort of this rebellion against the establishment, but the 60s was also about Vietnam and a lot of other things that were going on politically that we can't relate to at all in this current age, of course. It is weirdly relevant right now, but so it was really a movie of the times. I also just want to say, as a side note to what Molly said about the Academy Awards. So Dede Allen and Sam, Dede Allen edited Bonnie and Clyde, and Sam edited The Graduate the same year, and neither one of them were nominated. And Variety called it a spleen-busting travesty, which I thought was very accurate.
Very accurate. And Stuart Rosenberg was very focused on the casting of this movie, even beyond Paul Newman. You can imagine the ensemble, all the other prisoners were such a huge part of it.
Yeah, so Paul Newman was a member of the Actors Studio, and Stuart Rosenberg spent months creating this incredible cast, who were 20 members. 20 of them were members of the Actors Studio as well. So you may recognize Harry Dean Stanton.
Well, I noticed in the credits his name was Dean Stanton. No Harry.
Yeah. And
Dennis Hopper.
Dennis
being
Hopper.
his usual Dennis Hopper self.
Right. And he was nobody then. 2 years later, he made Easy Rider, and the rest is history. And when I watched the movie again, one of the things that struck me is how much Sam focused on the sort of Greek chorus of all the prisoners, and how much of the story is played through their eyes, and how much he captured all of the quirkiness and the specific characters of not just George Kennedy, but also the rich guy, and he said he loved Dennis Hopper because he would do quirky things, but just how he was a reluctant hero. They followed him. He was their idol because he was rebellious, but he didn't want that role. He was just going through his own pain and his own journey. But he said that one line, which I thought was so powerful: "Stop feeding off me," And then they couldn't look at him when they thought they broke him. Of course they didn't. But I just thought it's so interesting when editors, they know how to move the audience, what the audience needs, what they're focused on, and I just thought reactions were such a powerful part of it. Both these incredible group shots too, but just and the other thing I want to mention, in case I forget, one of the wonderful pieces of wisdom about editing is that movies are a series of arcs, and in order to have a really strong impact, you have to build to exciting moments or fast cutting or energy, and then you have to go back down and build up again and trust letting things breathe. And like for example, obviously the car washing scene and the egg eating scene, and these are very exciting scenes, and the momentum of the editing keeps building, the shots get shorter and faster, and it's very exciting and funny. But then in between, he would really let everything breathe, and the sort of mundane drudgery of prison life, you had to experience that as well. Not only because it was realistic and sort of documentary-like, but also so you feel the full impact of the exciting moments. It's a very important thing to do in movies, and editors are very aware of that.
So let's talk about how Sam came onto this movie. So he actually was not the first editor hired for this movie. Someone else cut the first fourth of the movie. Sam made sure that man had a job before he agreed to take this one.
That's what editors are very
yeah.
Should be honorable that way.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have each other's back. And he had already, even though he was not nominated for this or The Graduate, he had already been nominated for an Academy Award for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. So he was very much an established, well-known, talented editor. And yet, what did Stuart Rosenberg have him do to prove that he was worthy of this movie?
By the way, can I just ask, can you raise your hand, all the editors in the audience?
Just out of curiosity.
Okay.
You're going to roll your eyes at this story, and you should. You should.
Yes,
that's the correct reaction.
This is a painful thing that many of you relate to. So here he did this phenomenal and very challenging job. He said cutting Virginia Woolf like a bucket of worms. Dialogue scenes of that nature are the most challenging thing. And yet, he had to audition for Stuart Rosenberg and cut the fight scene because he wanted to the director wanted to make sure he could cut action scenes, which are actually easier to cut than what he did on Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. So what he did was now in the moviola days, when you put sound effects on a sequence, it's really not the same as doing it on an Avid or doing it digitally. You have to actually mix it and put the sound in. But he wanted to dazzle Stuart Rosenberg, so he put all these amazing sound effects in the fight scene. And I don't know if you guys noticed it, but one of the things I thought was, it's such a pivotal scene because, of course, this is when the prison officials see that he's a problem because he won't give up. And he also earns the respect of everybody, including George Kennedy. But what I thought was really interesting is you have all this cheering, and the sound is just kind of overwhelming, and it's propelling the scene. And then suddenly, when you see he's earning the respect that he won't give up, it gets very quiet. Mm-hmm. The music starts to come in, but the sound dies out pretty dramatically. And I just thought that was so interesting, that sound sort of supported what was going on emotionally and psychologically in that scene.
It was a brutal scene to shoot, too. They shoot it over 3 days. There was no doubles. It was just, it was the 60s, man. I don't know. It was Paul Newman and George Kennedy, beating each other up in the dirt. All that dirt was real. All the sweat was real. You can tell, there's no special effect. They're not spritzing them, in between scenes. And that scene also, as an editor, he had to think so much about power dynamics, right? So if you notice, you can feel the camera looking up at George Kennedy and the sun, and like Paul Newman. And so there are moments where you are literally in his perspective. Yeah.
Right, and sort of emphasizing the difference in size of the two, and of course, that also emphasizes how brave Paul Newman was, and that he wasn't intimidated by the greater size of George Kennedy. Yeah.
Let's talk about the egg scene. The egg scene, I actually have a tattoo of an egg, if anyone wants to see it later, for this scene, not just because I like eggs. So we don't know exactly what the fact is. We were talking about this. So according to Sam, the editor, Paul Newman did not eat a single egg. It was all editing and performance and cinematography. When you research it, some people claim he ate 8 to 12 eggs. So we believe Sam, because why might we believe the editor in this situation?
Because the editors always know.
They're the only one that sees all the footage.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, we think, hey, maybe while chewing something got down there, but he didn't actually eat any eggs. But, why was this scene so, going back to what you were saying about the arc and pacing, thinking about this long movie that, by the end of it, you're really suffering. And so the editor has to think about how to get you to that point, that you want to get to that end and you can kind of survive the movie. Why was this egg scene so pivotal, and what was his thinking in cutting it?
Well, it is where he becomes the hero, first of all. And a lot of editing is about transitions, and one of my favorite transitions, and it's sort of a very tight cut, very hard cut, is this sequence. This is not about the egg scene, but I'm just talking about these exciting scenes. I think of the car wash scene, the tar scene, the egg eating scene. One of my favorite transitions is when the car wash scene happens. It's freedom. It's this drudgery, and there's this sexy woman, and they're all sexually pent up and frustrated, and there's this hard cut to the shower, And
what are they doing in the shower?
Yeah, nowadays they would show a little more of how they dealt with their frustration, shall we say. But there was something so interesting about how then after that there was just it had this impact multiple times. Mm-hmm. But there was this energy that propelled through. And the egg eating scene is all part of that too.
Well, and it's interesting because in the screenplay, the egg eating scene wasn't even meant to be comedic, but as the editor, he recognized that at that central point in the movie, we needed that levity of being entertained and kind of feeling like the prisoners and having that release. And similar to the cut to the shower, it's like we have the pace and the pace and the pace, and then he's lying on the table, and Sam just lets us look at him in a Jesus pose, which I don't think is an accident. lying on the
It's a lot.
table, just and luckily Paul Newman could actually do that with his stomach, so that was
Yeah.
lucky.
So he apparently did, what was it, 200
Oh yeah, he claims that he did 200 sit-ups a day.
on a slant board. I think he did more than that.
I think genetics were involved.
Yes, I do.
Personally. Just putting that out there. So Sam loved Paul Newman. Like I said, we are marked safe. And what were some of Sam's stories about Paul Newman?
I mean, he said, first of all, the camaraderie among all the prisoners, this was a real thing. I mean, they, believe it or not, had a wonderful time working together. It looks brutal, but I think there was just, they were sort of living that life, and these were wonderful actors that were relishing this moment of being in this film. But so Paul Newman would go to Daly's every day with a six-pack.
Yeah, he would show up with a six-pack
A
to
beer.
Daly's. He was a good old boy.
Yeah, and Joanne was with him.
Well, you know, of course she was.
No, and he was wonderful to work with. Sam had one moment with him. Well, actually,
Well, it's actually a good story about him because they disagreed about something, and Paul Newman eventually was like, "Sam, you're right." So, yay, he believed the editor.
yeah. Do you want to explain what it was?
Yeah. So listen. At the end of the day, he's an actor, and I'm sure there was a little part of his brain that was like, "I might win an Academy Award for this," which he did not. And so at the very end when he gets shot in the neck. And if you notice, he gets shot in the neck, and then we see Boss Godfrey, kind of doing whatever with his gun. And then we go back to Paul Newman. And Paul Newman was like, just stay on me. Just stay on me. Don't go out to Boss Godfrey, It's like he wanted that moment. He had that monologue, and we'll get to the monologue. But at first, Paul was like, no, just stay on me. And then Sam convinced him that he was right. So as an actor, if anyone here is an actor, be friendly with your editor. They're the one making you look good. Seriously.
Yeah, and so I don't know how you all felt about the ending, but Sam did not like the ending.
Yeah, he thought the monologue was not in line with the character.
Yeah, he thought it was too long.
Yeah.
And he just said he didn't believe it. And it was very writerly, and then the very end of the movie, what was so beautiful about, if you remember that shot of him prone after he eats all the eggs and he has that smile on his face, and if you really focused, and if they had just stayed with him at the back of the car when he had been shot, he had that same smile. So it was a way of giving you something without being 100% tragic. And that was originally the end. And then there was, I don't know if you noticed, but there's a lot of traffic light things. There was a traffic light. I think there was a stoplight, actually. And so the studio wanted a happy ending. So they made Sam go in and find all those smiles.
Yeah, so they're like, give us a smile montage. Like as if that's going to just, wash over everything else that we just experienced.
Sam was very upset about that.
Yeah.
He did not like that.
Sometimes as editors, that is what we experience.
But it was studio pressure too. I mean, that was, although, what's weird about that? They bought the project because they said it was okay that he died, and then they had to. Well, anyway.
Producers aren't always consistent. What can we say? The cinematographer also got a note that he found annoying, but also makes a lot of sense. Read Paul Newman. Conrad Hall, who is a wonderful cinematographer, worked on many great movies. He was told that he had to reshoot a scene 5 times because the Warner Brothers executives complained that Paul Newman's blue eyes were not prominent enough. So that was an actual note that the cinematographer got. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, they also they shot that scene where George Kennedy says, he tells all the other prisoners, the speech about Paul Newman, and so that was unfortunate.
Yeah. And what's interesting is, in this day and age, this movie feels like it could be made today, but at the time period, it was considered very brutal, very savage. It was kind of surprising that a major studio would make a movie like this that was so kind of raw and real and showing this darker side of American life.
Yeah, and it was a very pivotal time in film history because there was the Hayes Act, which was a lot of censorship, and this was funny. Virginia Woolf was also part of that with the swearing, and it was little by little losing its power. And then all the things we have now, the rating system, PG, and all that came soon after. But they did get away with it, and I just want to say something about the violence, and I want to use a word that I think really speaks to Sam's approach to the film and what he always did, which is restraint. I mean, they're restraint from cutting, like I said, letting things play out. But what's interesting about the restraint with the violence is it made it more devastating. It wasn't cut up. You had to experience it fully, and that was intentional, I think.
Well, and also, as an editor, trusting that the audience, they don't need to have so much of something forced onto them to understand. It's like trusting the intelligence of your audience and trusting them to make the connections. And another fun fact that I thought I'd throw out there. So Bobbie was married to Sam for many wonderful years. And
she's a product of that.
Edited by Sam O'Steen. And her father was also a film editor, Richard Meyer, and Paul Newman is the only actor that they share. What movie did Richard Meyer edit?
He edited Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. And by the way, Conrad Hall, the cinematographer, filmed that as well. So, and I just thought, I don't know if you guys all felt this, but I just think the cinematography was astounding. And what's interesting is Stuart Rosenberg said that he heard complaints that it was too beautiful. But I think it was sort of made it mythic, and I don't know if you noticed it, but one of the remarkable things about the cinematography was how it reflected the temperature. Like the cold mornings, the blue mornings, and the sort of searing sun. Like you really experienced it sort of viscerally. The sunglasses. Yeah.
I mean, it's so funny. I've seen this movie so many times, and Boss Godfrey, who's like the most terrifying. It's so funny because when you look at lists of famous villains, speaking of both movies, they group Mrs. Robinson with Boss Godfrey, and I'm like, maybe not so. Maybe in a post-Me Too era, we're a little kinder to Mrs. Robinson, but he's wearing a freaking leather jacket. That man is a psychopath.
What's also interesting, and I can't give credit to Sam because I don't really know, but at some point, he did talk in the movie. And isn't it so much more powerful that he never says a word?
Yeah.
That was, whether it was an editorial choice or it was made during the writing, I don't know, but yeah.
Whether it was a choice, I'm sure Sam agreed with it. Once again, trusting your audience. You don't need to hear that man talk. His actions say you don't even need to see his freaking eyes. His shooting and the way he walks around is enough. So I thought this is where we can open up to any questions that anyone may have about the editing of this. Sam O'Steen, Paul Newman. Might just be opinions about Paul Newman, but.
Hi, that was spectacular. I just was so struck by all the dissolves and the superimpositions in this film. And as many of us know, that was a very slow, laborious technical process in the days that Sam did this. And I wonder if you could talk about that process and how he did the opticals.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, he didn't talk to me about that, so I can't speak to it without BSing. But I was struck by that as well. And it's interesting because it didn't feel dated, but it is something that's not done anymore. But I did notice that a lot of times the dissolves were very much taking advantage of the cinematography. And these, they weren't pre-planned, but I'm sure Sam had a lot to do with it. I just can't honestly speak to it because he didn't talk to me about it, but it is striking. And what I also thought was interesting is sometimes dissolves can slow a movie down, but I do think it's partly because they were so visually arresting, and also it took the onus away from sort of the episodic nature of the story by making it sort of visually flowing and beautiful. So I thought that was an interesting device. And I hadn't noticed that until I watched it recently. But yeah, it's unusual. There's so many of them.
Anyone else? Oh, was Sam paid for the audition edit? That's a great question. No. Free labor, baby.
And you know what's funny? I did ask him about it. It was really, I was annoyed. I said, right? I mean, and he wasn't. And, you know, if you talk to editors, they'll sort of roll their eyes and say, yeah. I mean, I think there's so many things annoying about it. One of them is that editors can be typecast. Oh, that's a comedy editor. They can't cut out. You know, part of what bothers me always is films that are nominated for Academy Awards are often very high, filled with action. And, you know, movies that are about subtext and delicate moments that can make or break a movie and, you know, just intimate films rarely get priority at the Academy Awards. Even editors tend to nominate flashy movies, and car chases are actually easy for editors to edit. So, and the fight scene, that's, I would think there would be other scenes in Cool Hand Luke that would actually be harder, but he said, just whatever, they want to see if I can cut an action movie. He did, and also Sam was, he was very confident. I think he looked forward to showing off. And we didn't tell. So in the old days of the movie yellow days, you could put an entire reel, which is about 10 minutes, on, you know, and just play an entire reel. So he would run entire reels for me. He wouldn't want sequences. And I don't know if he did that all the time, but he did it frequently. And every time he did it for the director, he'd slap his leg and go, "You're a pisser. You're a pisser, Sam."
And then he would just walk out the room. That was the feedback. You're a
But
pisser.
he called it, it's funny because he called it he said people said it was full of cutting room sequences. You know, there's a lot of sequences that are kind of made in the cutting room because they don't have a clear narrative script. I mean, like the flashy ones, the famous ones like the egg eating scene, or he said that when he cut the car washing scene, he used jump cuts. And if you really study it, you can see that the shots of her are very short because, again, the scene was about her. Of course, you had to see what she was doing to get that effect. But the length of the shots and the amount of the shots were the reaction shots. Mm-hmm. And also, it was a very important scene to set Paul Newman's character apart from the others because the shots to him were longer. He was more skeptical of how manipulative. She knows exactly what she's doing. You know, there were all these moments, whether they were nonverbal or verbal, where Sam would linger on him to set him apart from the crowd. So you incrementally would keep seeing that he was, you know, that he was not going along with all the cruelty and all the deference that all the prisoners were expected to follow.
Also, fun fact, that actress ended up marrying an editor. So there you go.
And she said in an interview, I was so innocent then. I didn't really understand what I was doing with the hose.
As Paul Newman said, she knew exactly what she was doing. Any other questions?
I was wondering if you could talk about the very beginning of the film, the very first shot especially, just deciding to start with the parking meters and, yeah, that the repetition of that shot throughout the beginning.
Well, like a lot of things in the movie, there's this beautiful rhythm and sound. It's almost musical, I feel. I don't know if you felt that, but it just set this tone of, first of all, it's kind of a mystery, like, you know, what is really happening? And then, you know, you have him opening the bottle, oh, he's drunk, and he's just, but, oh, and that whole block where they actually cut those meters off, that was just sitting there on a little street somewhere for many years just with. But I just think it set up a style, and it was just a visually very arresting scene that I think was a great way to start the movie, because you're telling, all scenes should tell more than one thing at once. So you're sort of setting up this character, but you're also setting up a style.
Yeah.
Because it is, like I said, a cutting room movie. It's very montage heavy, and and Sam enjoyed the freedom of working with these scenes where you could sort of create something and shape it where it didn't have an inherent shape. It was sort of shaped in the process of editing, visually and in terms of telling the story. So I think he had a lot of fun working on this movie because he had a lot of freedom to create something really compelling in the cutting room. So.
I think we have time for one more question.
One thing that they said in the beginning, how it's relevant for today, and one topic that like I noticed in the movie, it's about masculinity, and it was just so like, there was just so many instances where like Paul Newman's character is like the embodiment of like what like, it's like the man, Like for example, one scene that's so empathetic emotionally was when he sends the picture to his inmates, and how like showing him like, oh, it's okay, like I'm fine, even though I don't know if it's a lie or not. He says like I was lying, but that's like one thing I noticed about this movie during the whole time watching it, just this topic of like what it means to be like, and in this day and age of talking about masculinity and like the male loneliness and talking all about that, like this movie just really resonated with me with that.
I mean, Roger Ebert said, the physical presence of Paul Newman is the reason the movie works. The smile, the innocent blue eyes, the lack of strutting, right? So that's an interesting thing about him. He's so masculine, but in a way that, we see him cry. I've seen this movie so many times, but seeing it on a big screen, I cried when he was playing the banjo after his mother died, right? And so, yeah, thinking about modern day masculinity, like, he is the ultimate man, and he like cries when his mother dies. Yeah, it's fascinating.
They shot that towards the end of the film because he didn't know how to play the banjo, and he had to teach himself.
Well, he's a like confused masculinity. He's wounded, and he pulls away from it. We see his struggle, and it makes us love him more. It doesn't make us judge him or think he's less masculine. Paul Newman.
Yeah, and I think in a way Paul Newman himself embodied that too. I think I can't imagine this film with anyone else playing it. I think that, and like I said earlier, when he said, "Stop feeding off of me," he was just trying to find his way, and he wasn't like, it wasn't like machismo. It was just trying to survive, and also the whole thing about his, he had PTSD. They didn't use that phrase then, but I think there was also homoeroticism between him and George Kennedy, by the way.
Why not?
Why not? But yeah, but that speaks to what you're talking about too. That there was this really interesting, complex person that was obviously, if he hadn't been traumatized by the war, he could have ended up differently. But he was just trying to figure himself out, and was just, I think there was a lot of focus on his loneliness in the world. And I think Sam really found moments where you could see that, his alienation, and just, one of the things I thought was so powerful was when he started begging the guards, and all the prisoners couldn't look at him anymore because they were feeding off something that they thought he was, which he really wasn't. He was misunderstood by everyone, And I just want to say one more thing, because I forgot to mention this, about the editing of the scene with the mother. I just thought it was so interesting how Sam spent so much time on her at the end when he couldn't see her anymore, when he really wanted you to see her grief, but she didn't want to show it to her son. And I loved that moment when he really held on her. It just really hit home. But I think that scene spoke a lot to what you're talking about too. You know what I mean?
All right, thanks so much, everyone. We'll be in the lobby if you want to chat.